around. And to see my sisters are incredible human beings. And they always have been, really. And this was recognized in our primary school because there was an award called the Fletcher Award. And this was given to those students who had real integrity, who were loyal, who were inclusive, who had really helpful characteristics, stuff that both of my sisters possessed. And this was proven by the fact that they both won this award. I did not win this award. Here's a photo of Abby with the said award. I couldn't find a photo of Gemma, but she'll probably thank me for that, considering this is going to go on the internet. So Abby proudly possessing this award. And then fast forward to my secondary school. At school, we would hold our annual sports day at this place. It was called Woodburn Road Athletic Track in Sheffield. And each year, I would spend my day hearing the announcements over the tannoys. Abby Booth wins the Year 8 100-metre race, breaks the school record. And then just moments later, Gemma Booth breaks a 200 metres Year 10 school race. And now this might be because of my rock-like characteristics, but I didn't win any races. I didn't break any school records. In fact, the only announcement that had any relevance to me on sports day was that of, can the boys trying to climb over the fence please come back to the fields? I have not won a great deal in my life, but one thing I have won, and this is something that I'm really proud of, is this. You can't quite see from the plaques, but this is the Beacon Football Club 2020-21 season award for the Gaffers player and the players player. Now I'm really honoured to have won this award, not only to be recognised by the manager, but to be recognised by my teammates. This is a significant achievement for me. This will put me in the Hall of Fame of Beacon Football Club when they pick that list at one point in the future, I'm sure. My grandchildren will be able to look back and remember me having achieved great things. But let me ask a question this morning. How do you think you will be remembered in history? Or maybe, how would you like to be remembered in history? Now, when I'm not scoring goals for the Beacon FC or at home with my family, I work as a facilities manager. And one of the contracts that I look after is the National Archives. This is it here. That's half of it. There's another side as well. And we get a lot of avid researchers and historians who come to the archives to look at historical records, things that have been recorded in history. And we held an event there recently for a researcher who'd recently died. Their family had made a plaque and they wanted it to be placed on one of the trees in the gardens to mark the memory of this person. They wanted it to be in a place that the person loved so they can be remembered on the grounds. I wonder, have you ever thought what might be written on your plaque? I saw one recently similar that really resonated with me and something that I felt might be applicable as and when I die. This was for Barbara, who was awful when hungry, but otherwise pretty solid. If that's written on my tombstone when I go, fair play, I'd be happy with that. Anyone else in the room relate to Barbara? Yeah, I think there's a few of us. So today, as we jump back into the book of Hebrews, we're going to be looking at this very thing. We've reached chapter 11 of this book, and this chapter is often referred to as the Hall of Faith. The names and stories of men and women who've done incredible things, empowered by their faith in God. We see their great acts of faith recorded in the pages of history. They're recorded in the Bible that we're going to look at today. And today, as we look at this chapter, I want us to be inspired and I want us to be encouraged as we study the faithful men and women who've done incredible things and who have gone before us. But first, I want to do a quick recap into where we are in Hebrews and a bit of the context of the book. So Hebrews, we don't know who wrote it, but we do believe it's believed that they had first-hand access to the disciples. They would have been familiar with them and they would have known them. They were writing to Jewish Christians, or at least the writer does assume that the people hearing the letter would have had a good understanding of the Old Testament or the Torah. It appears that the hearers might have been downbeat, facing imprisonment and persecution at the time. We read about this in chapter 10 of Hebrews. But the first 10 chapters are there to elevate Jesus above everything else. To remind the Jewish people that Jesus is better than some of the things that they held in really high regard from their Jewish heritage. They're to remind people that Jesus is better than the angels. Jesus is better than the priests. Jesus is better than the kings, and he's better than the animal sacrifices. It's 10 incredible chapters exalting the name of Jesus to the highest place and reminding the believers not to forget their first love, not to forget the things that have been won for them by Jesus on the cross paying the ultimate sacrifice. And now we reach Hebrews 11. Today, I'm going to jump a little bit around it. We're not necessarily following the order of the text. I'm going to pick out parts of the text that I think I can apply to our lives today. Because you see, chapter 11, this is the hinge on which this book swings. The first 10 chapters, as I've said, are exalting the name of Jesus, and chapter 11 is the hinge that moves us into the application of all the things that have been taught. It's a stop and think kind of chapter. It's to encourage them with stories of people who've gone before them, to give them inspiration that God has done amazing things historically. So let's read the first few verses. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. For this is what the ancients were commended for. It's the first 2 verses of this chapter. And this is the biblical definition of faith. And I've been struck as I prepared this week that faith is an enormous subject. And to try and tackle the whole thing this morning is very difficult. But it's really important because it can be viewed from many different angles. And I think if I asked the room, I'd get 200 different accounts of what faith means to you or what your definition of faith might be. So the Bible is helpful. It sets some grounding. It helps us to understand what it means. I want to look this morning at what faith is and what it does as we reflect on the characters that we're reading about. We see in the first few verses that faith and hope are linked together. Now, they're closely linked and often seen together in other parts of the Bible. And hope is a very accessible concept for us because we're probably all hoping for something. Personally, I'm hoping Sheffield Wednesday could actually win a game of football this season. Seems unlikely. But having hope is one thing, but you need faith to underpin that hope, because otherwise that hope is just pure optimism, in my case, for an example. Faith gives you the confidence that the thing you're hoping for might actually be realized. Unlike my trivial hope that my football team might not suck anymore, the writer here is talking about a hope way more profound, something way more serious. And I think we all have those kind of hopes as well, don't we? What is it that you're hoping for? What is it that you're longing to see happen in your life? See, the ultimate hope of the Christian is that we'll be welcomed into heaven to have an eternity with the one who made us. By having the faith that's described in this text, we can have an assurance and a confidence that God who began a good work in us will see it through to completion. So let's read on into verses 5 and 6. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So here we see faith is essential if we're to please God. And this is why it's really important that we look at this subject this morning. It's critical if we want to live a life that is pleasing to God, we understand what the faith is that this text is talking about. Enoch is one of the first faith heroes that we're going to look at today. And as we read of his life in Genesis chapter 5, out of here, we can see that he walked faithfully with God for 300 years. And then it says God took him. Now, there's 2 occasions in the Bible where we hear of God taking people. One Enoch, another one is Elijah. And I always thought, that'd be a pretty good way to go. One day, God just, he saves you from having to go through and experience death. One day, God's like, you know what? You're pleasing to me. I think I'll take you. We know that Enoch walked with God on a regular basis. That's what the text said. And it might have been one of these days they were out on their walk and God was like, you know what? We're closer to my house. Do you want to just come in? And I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us how it happened. And there's only another couple of mentions of Enoch in the Bible. We see him referenced in the book of Jude in the New Testament. And we see him in one of Luke's genealogies in his account of the gospel. Then Hebrews here, it tells us that Enoch was taken by God and did not experience death. But he was commended as one who pleased God. All of this was fueled by his faith in God. And there's something I'd like us to consider as we reflect on the life of Enoch. You know, the writer here gives us a really big clue as to what this might be. how do we get this kind of faith that will enable us to walk faithfully in a manner that pleases God? We see it in verse 6. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists. That might feel a bit obvious, but I really felt the Lord impress this on me as I was preparing. Do you really believe that he exists? Do you really believe he can affect change in your life? Have you been swept up into this culture and the traditions of people who are generally quite nice? It's quite entertaining coming here, you know? Have you been swept up into that and missed the point? Do you call yourself a Christian, but when really questioned or pushed on a subject, do you really believe God can come and intervene? When times get hard, do you believe that God has the power to affect change? Do you even bring it to him? Or do you find yourself putting your trust in other areas, leaning on maybe your own abilities, maybe your own understanding? Do you look to everything else before you might consider bringing it to God? You know, we can all do this from time to time. I'm sure everyone would nod along with this. Personally, this week, I did exactly this thing. I've just taken on a new contract at work, and I had to report on the results of this contract on Thursday. It was a very big meeting, and I was stressing about it because the results were not good. Through nothing that I had done, I'd just taken it over. But I had to sit before the executives of my company and explain why this contract wasn't performing. And my wife overheard me on the phone the night before talking to my boss, and I was joking. I said, I'm going to have to put on my thick pants today, because I think I'm going to get a kick in. And she graciously said to me after, is everything okay? And I said, well, you know, I'm just really not looking forward to this. It's going to be really hard. They're going to ask me all these difficult questions, and it's not going to be fun, and I'm going to get a butt kick in. And she was like, have you prayed? And I was like, no. No, I haven't. That's a really good point. And you know what? I prayed. And you know what? It went well. You know, my instinct in that moment was to try and prepare myself. You know, I went over the numbers again and again. I had answers to all the questions I was anticipating on the day. In that moment, my faith was in my own ability. I'd not even considered the idea of bringing this before God. But thankfully, I'm married to someone who always brings things before God. I'm very blessed to have her as my wife. A big whoop. As I said, we can all do this from time to time. But can I ask you this morning, has this become your default position? You know, have you moved away from believing that Jesus and God can impact the situations you're going through? Is your faith in something or someone else? You know, in order to please God, we know we must have faith, but that faith must be rooted in a real conviction that he who is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he will do. God, there's a few words in there. He is who he says he is, and he will do what he said he will do. Do you believe that? In my experience, he's never let me down. Time and time again, God has provided, and God has proven himself to be faithful. You know, I just love it when people contribute, because the contributions this morning just fit with what I'm going to say. I keep them in your memory. Think about the stone. Think about trusting in God when circumstances don't seem to look like you know what's going to happen. Believing God exists is fundamental to biblical faith. We need to have the confidence and assurance that the things he has promised will happen. Having biblical faith is about believing in the promises, and I think there are two kinds of promises that God gives to his people. There's global promises and there's personal promises. You see, God has a plan for the restoration of this earth, to bring it back to the perfect creation that he started with. And we have a part to play in this, and that's where the personal promises of God come into our lives, because he wants us to participate in them with him. You know, we have a role to play on this mission of God. And I want to look at two more heroes now whose lives epitomize trusting in God's plans and his promises, both on a global scale and on a personal one. So the greatest proportion of the narrative in Hebrews 11 is dedicated to the story of Abraham. And as I mentioned earlier, this was written to people who will have had an assumed knowledge of who he was and an assumed knowledge of the Old Testament. And see, amongst these people, Abraham was famous for his faith and his walk of obedience. In his life, he will have been known to the hearers that this was an example that they could refer to. God made a promise to Abraham in chapter 12. He told him to leave the land of his fathers and go to a new land that he would show him. He said he's going to make him into a great nation and that all the people of the earth will be blessed through him. So I want to read the account of Abraham's life from Hebrews 11 and starting in verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him in the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. See, Abraham received a promise and an instruction. Abraham didn't know where he was going, but he needed to trust God on the journey he was about to embark on. See, God guided him to the land that he had marked out for him, but that land was occupied by the Canaanites. Abraham became a stranger in the land but God provided for him in abundance and kept him safe and gave him peace during this time. Abraham kept holding on to the promise of God and believing him in faith that this would happen. It's only when Abraham gets there that God goes on to tell him that it's actually his offspring that will inherit this land. Abraham will see out the rest of his days in temporary dwellings of tents. He will never see the foundations of the city established himself. He left the land of his fathers, where he'd been familiar, to a land that was unfamiliar. Abraham here shows a complete act of obedience and trust in God, following the call that he gave him. It's saying, I don't know what's going to happen on the journey, but if it's God that's asking, then I'm going to go. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. He didn't know what the journey ahead looked like, but he had confidence in the God that he believed in that would get him there. He was obedient to the call despite not having all the answers. You know, Melza said this morning, don't know all the answers, don't know what's going to happen, but her testimony is that she knows and trusts in God, and that's the kind of biblical faith that we're called to. Abraham was obedient despite knowing the outcome. But why? What gave him reason to believe that God was able to deliver? And I think verse 3 here helps us understand partly why Abraham trusted God. It says in verse 3, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Now this is a little bit tricky to unpack, and I hope I can help you understand it. Abraham, as he observed the universe around him, would have knew of the creation story in Genesis, and that it was by the power of God that this world was made. That the invisible, unseen God was the instigator and the source of everything he saw around him. Abraham journeyed around, and on that journey, he would have been surrounded by mountains and creation, and all the time, this was singing the majesty and the power of God. He would have looked at the scale of the mountains and marveled around at the power of the God who did create them. And you know what? I think it's as true today as it is in Abraham's time. This is me snowboarding. And when I'm snowboarding and flying down a mountain, I'm taking in the surroundings and I'm looking at the grandeur and the beauty of what's around me. Not for 1 second can I possibly believe that this is all by chance. I believe the power of God is evident in creation. I believe it stands up to scrutiny when tested, and I believe that this is a marker of God's power and his ability to effect change in people's lives. But it's not only creation around him that gave him a reason to trust God. Abraham also had the testimonies of his family that had gone before him, where he'd seen the power of work in his life. Abraham would have known about the story of Noah and the flood and the ark. Noah's another one of the faith heroes who's listed in this chapter. He will have seen God demonstrate his ultimate authority and power over the earth through that story. He's seen God act, he's seen God move, and he's really familiar with that. The testimony of people who've gone before you is essential in having this kind of faith that gives you the assurance and the confidence that God will do what he says he's going to do. It's always been God's plan to restore the earth Since sin entered it, it was always his desire to come and restore it and to create a people for himself. Abraham walked, walked through this life by faith with the confidence that in a God who had done amazing things in the past. He was not put off by obstacles that came in his way. He wasn't put off by the stone in the shoe. When things started to get comfortable, he stopped, he trusted in God, and he had it dealt with. Now, I've mentioned that I'm a big snowboard fan, and I want to tell you of an incident that happened to me back in 2012 while on a mountain. We had what was called a whiteout day. Is anyone familiar with that? Anyone snowboard or ski here? A couple of people. Okay, well, a whiteout day looks like this. It's very white out. It's a clever name. Same place, very different view. So I'm stood in the same place, very different view, same outfit as well. And what happens on these days, the clouds come in and you can't see a thing. You can see from these pictures, it would be very hard to ski or snowboard in this situation. You lose all sense of direction when you're on a mountain. Snow is white, clouds are white. You lose the contours of the mountain, making it really tricky. I want to show you an example of what can happen if you decide to go riding on a whiteout day. Cruising along, looking cool, and then all of a sudden, what happens is the ground disappears underneath your feet and you eat a load of snow. You don't normally go out on a whiteout day. But when you're in the mountains, weather can change really, really quickly. And as we were traveling up this lift, the clouds came in. We got to the top of the mountain and we had a bit of a discussion. Well, we can't wait it out. We've got to go. We set off. We couldn't see the bottom. We couldn't see more than 2 meters in front of us. I could really only just see my feet. But we couldn't stay. We had to go. The thing is, with the mountain, it's a lot easier going down than it is trying to go back up. All we needed to do is point down and trust that gravity would do the job. I was trusting in a force a lot more powerful than myself. So despite not being able to see, we pointed down and I'll see what happens. I'd like to, well, as you can see, I made it. But it was a ropey time. It was tricky. You lost all the ability to see. On that day, I was snowboarding by faith and not by sight. I was trusting in gravity, and I couldn't see that, but I could trust it. That same day, I was on the same piste, on the same mountain. I'd done it before, and I have that vivid memory, standing on my board, slowly starting to lean, and the board slowly starts to go as it points down. They say the same kind of thing happens when you get sucked under a wave. If you just wait, if you just relax, you'll come up to the surface. The board slowly started to turn, and I trusted the direction. I knew there was other people around me somewhere, but I couldn't see them. I didn't know what their situation was, but eventually I got down. In that moment, my sight was gone. But I had confidence in what I was hoping for, that being that I would get to the bottom of the mountain in one piece. I had assurance of what I could not see. My assurance was in the gravity that would take me down the hill because I'd seen it happen. I'd done it before, I've experienced it. Often in the life of Abraham and his wife Sarah, you can understand why, if they looked at their current circumstances, they might have reason to doubt, but they didn't. If they looked at the seen things in front of them, they may have started to question the promises of God. So we're going to jump back into Hebrews 11. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was unable to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came the descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Now, I'm not going to unpack the whole story of Abraham, but Abraham had been promised a son, but him and his wife were really past childbearing age. She was in her late 80s, and when God told her she was going to conceive for the first time, her response was, she laughed. She laughed at the idea of it. And the account in Hebrews here is brutally honest about their ability to conceive. It's not just Sarah who was deemed too old. Look what it says about Abraham. He as good as dead. Imagine that. Imagine someone looks at you and said, you're as good as dead, you are. The writer is really trying to emphasize the point here. Everything in the natural order of things was against them. If they looked at the facts, they would never have believed that they would be able to bear a son. But God works in the impossible. This is why their lives were recorded in the book of Hebrews in the Hall of Faith. They were able to lift their eyes beyond what was in front of them, the circumstances, to a power much higher and much greater, to the one who has shown already that he is able to do the impossible. They're examples of lives lived by faith and not by sight. But you know what? I feel there's another element of this story that I want to pick out because it really jumped out to me as I was preparing. I'm going to read the text. She considered him faithful. And it might be a sentence that we throw away as we read through this. But there's a common understanding about religious faith that the world has today, that faith is just the absence of thinking. You know, that it's phrases like blind faith or leap of faith suggests that there's nothing more to it. There's nothing of substance that stands behind it. But it's what religious people lean on sometimes when they haven't got an intellectual answer to a question that comes their way. When they don't have a solution, they just say faith. It's the get out of jail free card. It might be a perception. But you know what? This is not the case. This is not what we see in the life of Sarah and Abraham. It's not what biblical faith is rooted in. This kind of faith that we're supposed to have has real confidence behind it. There's evidence that backs it up. There's an assurance. It's not whimsical. It's not loose. It's not shakable. It's biblical faith. Sarah's initial response was laughter, but after this, she must have taken some time to think. She'd considered that the one who made the promise and remembered that through her life he had been faithful. She had a confidence based on her past experience. She had good reason to believe that he could do the seemingly impossible. And it's not just Sarah. Abraham as well, in a story later on in his life, had a similar thing. We'll read about it here. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promise was about to sacrifice his only son, one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. And here it is. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. Abraham's promised son, God's now asking him to sacrifice. But he's reasoned it out. He's thought it through. He's looked at the possibilities and he's come to the conclusion. You know what? My God can do amazing things. He could raise the dead. I'm going to trust him and be obedient to what he's called me to do. I hope today that if you call yourself a Christian, you've not abandoned any sense of reasoning or thinking. I hope that your faith is rooted in something of real substance because it's there. Biblical faith is rooted in reason and consideration. So I ask the question, what does this mean to us then? Well, simply, church, I want to invite us back to biblical faith. I want us to have the kind of faith that we read about in these stories. I want us to have a faith that's well considered and a faith that is enduring, a faith that produces an exciting kind of people, a people who trust God even though the immediate things in front of them might seem impossible, the challenges you're walking through might seem difficult, a people who can lift their eyes to a bigger picture and not worry about worldly obstacles that might lay before you. At the end of chapter 11, there's an incredible piece of writing, and it's inspired me every time I've read it, that talks about some of the things that these men and women of faith have done. These are the shoulders of the people. These are the things that we have as testimonies that we're standing on. I want to read it. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, and David, and Samuel, and all the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle. That's the kind of people I want to be a part of. Close the mouths of lions, quench the fires of the flames, escape the sword. What is that in your life? It might not be the mouth of the stone in your shoe, might not be the mouth of a lion, it might not be the flame, but we have them. Let's stop and consider them this morning. Let's take a moment to think. As Sarah said, when you're on that walk, you need to stop. You need to recognize the challenge and give it to God. Give it to him. This is what biblical faith is about. I wonder if the band could join me back up on stage. So let's ask ourselves the question, where is our faith today? Are you riding high at the moment, believing that God can do more than we could possibly understand and imagine, that your faith is rock solid and that you're pursuing him with everything that you've got? Or are you clinging on and these accounts of these faithful men and women are causing you trouble this morning and they seem so distant and far away from where you are? What is it that you're trusting God for? What are the promises that he's spoken over your life? What are the obstacles that you're facing? Is this something that seems impossible, that you cannot get over? Can we, together this morning, take them to God? We have a ministry time at the end, as we've talked about. Let's use this as an opportunity. Can we start believing that God is real again this morning, if that's where you've slipped? That he is interested in the stones in your shoe? You know what? The how of this sermon comes actually in chapter 12 of Hebrews. And the first 2 chapters say this: Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance this race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the Father. Church, we don't have to drum up this faith on our own. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus, for he is the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. We can trust him because he can understand us. He knows our struggles. The reality is everyone has faith in something, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. But the real question is, does your faith have any substance? It's not the sincerity of your faith that counts when it comes to saving you. It's the substance of your faith that counts. You can have sincere faith in the wrong thing and it will not help. Jesus is our firm foundation. He is the one of substance. He is the one we should put our trust in. He is the one who is with us and will never fail us. Jesus of Nazareth walked this earth. He did die on a cross. Very few people can argue that. It's recorded in the pages of history. The question God to ask is he who he says he is? Did he do what he said he would do? Did he actually rise from the dead? You know what? My answer? He absolutely did. And you know why I believe that? Because I've seen him work miracles in my life. I've seen the testimonies of the men and women recorded in this book who have gone before me. And I've seen the testimonies of the men and women in this room where God has intervened, where God has stepped in and God has brought about change. Wherever your faith is at today, Jesus Christ, who endured the cross, he is here today. He is alive and he's wanting to be the foundation that you build your life upon. Let's put our faith back in Jesus Christ, the firm foundation. Rach.
Hi guys, don't click away just yet. I wanted to say thank you so much to you for watching our video, and whether this is your first time watching or your 100th time, you are so welcome here. My name is Sarah and I am on the staff team here at the Beacon Church. As a church, we exist to help people know God, find freedom, discover their purpose and make a difference. If you wanted to find out more, then please do watch the rest of the content on our channel, or you can click on the links below to follow our social media and our website, where you can also find information about how to support us financially. And of course, finally, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with a friend, not for our benefit, but for yours. And thank you so much for your time. God bless.